Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. This month, as India struggles through one of the worst aviation disruptions in years, we're left with some very hard lessons. None of them are comforting. The first lesson: the air monopoly of Indigo has to end. When one airline controls 6 out of every 10 seats in the sky, any internal problem doesn't stay internal. It becomes a national crisis. Fares go up, flights disappear, and passengers across India pay the price. The second lesson: India needs formal SOPs. Under acts like essential services maintenance for private sectors that affect millions, we've rules for public transport, we've rules for power and fuel, but aviation, one glitch can bring the entire country to a halt. There is no emergency mechanism to contain the damage. The third lesson: billionaire-driven industries can manufacture a crisis for both people and governments. Whether it's pilot shortages, internal disputes, or market aggression, the consequences are always externalized on the taxpayer, on the traveler, on the state. The anonymous letter written by an Indigo employee highlights exactly this. The writer suspects that Indigo could have let the crisis escalate as they wanted to bring FTTL on its knees. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most frustrating one. Even after everything that has happened, you will still have to fly Indigo, because when there is a monopoly, there is no choice. And when there is no choice, nothing changes. This brings us into the bigger questions India must ask. What lessons have we learned from air monopoly in India? It's clear that when one airline controls the skies, the entire country becomes vulnerable. One operational failure, one internal crisis, and millions are grounded. What then needs to be done to reduce Indigo's market share to less than 25%? Airline industry is so vulnerable in India, and we've seen it as many airlines in the past have crashed and burnt. The next question: what can be done to bring in more airlines after the collapse of Kingfisher? Because the truth is, one airline can't take up majority share. High costs, high risk, high failure rate. Who will want to invest in airlines, though, after the fates of Goyal and Malia, two of the biggest names in the Indian aviation sector, who followed spectacularly? That memory still scares investors away. Can India rebuild its confidence in this sector? And finally, how long will it take before Indigo gets cut down to size? Because unless competition rises, unless new airlines survive, unless the system becomes fairer and safer for both passengers and carriers, Indigo will continue to dominate, not by choice, but by default. Joining us live, Captain C.S. Randhawa, President, Federation of Indian Pilots. Yogesh Kumar, Aviation Professional, joins us live. Mukesh Tyagi, Regional Vice President, Air Passengers Association of India, is live with us. Joyita Basu, editor of The Sunday Guardian, is also joining the broadcast live. Captain Randhawa, let me begin with you first. What are the lessons of this entire Indigo crisis that need to be learnt once and for all? We've had a mess this week and last week. We can't afford to have it again.
Foremost thing, Uday, thank you for inviting me to the NewsX channel, and good evening all the panelists. I would like to first answer you in stages. The first part of the answer is that you said that what about monopoly? Now, in case of India, it is the duopoly. The Indigo maintaining about 67% share and Air India maintaining about 4 point some percent. So both airlines put together, they hold a market share of 91%, 91.7%. Now, the point is that when you have just one or two airlines, they'll form a cartel. And they will not let things move. And that is what was happening in last 24 months. These two airlines were mainly responsible for not letting the FDTLCR being implemented. Ultimately, we had to knock the doors of the court, and we got a court order, and we were able to implement it from 1st of July and 1st of November, the second part. Now, the point is that there is an essential need. It is very clearly shown that when you have monopoly, you will take the government to ransom and you will take the people of the country to ransom, whether it's a corporate, whether it's an airline. It's a very clear-cut thing which has come out in the open now, that you cannot run airlines over here who dictate terms and who will basically control what they want. In fact, I won't be surprised that this is masterminded, because the aircraft were on the ground, the crews were available at the airports, but flights were not released. So it is all bogey. If you see the reply which they have given, not even one answer is satisfactory. I don't know how the government has accepted that answers.
Okay.
Yes, Uday.
Okay, Yogesh Kumar, come in here. Yogesh Kumar, of course, the accountability is just beginning for Indigo. But what lessons need to be learned from this entire crisis for the aviation ecosystem, for the policymakers as well, to ensure things like this do not repeat?
First of all, very good evening to all the panelists and the viewers. And as the captain said about the monopoly, that should be end. If I talk about to end this monopoly, then definitely the regulator should take the very strict actions, and definitely they should come out with their rule and regulation to be implemented in a one go, rather than giving any kind of the leverages. And this crisis, which had happened in the last week of this month, would teach us so many things. Everybody's life gets on this stake, and the things which got into our notice, that each and everything would available to fly the passenger from A to B, but due some monopolies activities in this Indian aviation would not let them to fly. Apart from that, Edge, we know that the new guidelines and the new decisions were made from the government side to cut down their operation flight schedules by the 5% of the earlier and the 10% about the operations, so that this whatever the limited crew they do have, they operate accordingly, and the slots should be given to the other airlines, so that the healthy competition should build up in the aviation market. And the passengers, they don't have any kind of the fear to travel A to B. They don't get stuck at any of the point. And secondly, I would say about the crew part, definitely they would get the efficient amount of the rest period at their home or their personal life. They will get it with the new rule and regulation implementation.
Okay, let me in fact take that to you, Mukesh Tyagi, as well. Mukesh Tyagi, this has been a harrowing 8-9 days for passengers. As the representative of the air passengers on the panel today, of course, being part of this association that you are, what would you urge policymakers to do? What would you hope happens in the Indian aviation system to ensure that a duopoly ends, and also a crisis that we saw never repeats?
Uday, thank you very much. And I must congratulate you. You are taking this crisis to logical end, and very, very comprehensive coverage you are doing. And you are actually doing a national service by highlighting one of the most serious emergencies India has ever faced. I mean, I have never seen the passengers have been treated like completely herd animals. I mean, even animals are treated better than the passengers. And there is a little sensitivity by the airlines to address those issues. You see, they can assuage their wound by providing alternative arrangements. They can control the hotel, they can provide them taxi to go back home, but there is no cooperative attitude coming from the airline. So passengers are completely lurched, they're left high and dry. You see, Indigo, it's like you want to set up a hotel and you don't have a chef to run the hotel. So it's exactly like that. Pilots are disgruntled, people are disgruntled. What for this kind of monopoly has been granted? Look at the profitability and the turnover. I mean, they are making $860 million profit, and also look at the revenue, 84,000 crore is their revenue. I mean, company has got enough deep pocket to sustain these kinds of setbacks. But it's a deliberate design. Either there's a stock market it is playing, because the stock market has plummeted, and there can be people who will be buying these stocks and come back to the normalcy and again will start selling. What I'm trying to say is we need to revamp. We need.
Okay, I think we've lost you. Mr. Tyagi. Joyita Basu, come in here. The big lessons that stand out for you are, what is believed the biggest lesson is from this that we must learn from. We must also have policy changes to ensure that the changes happen, of course, in the system of our country, in the aviation, where we're seeing a duopoly. In fact, many are calling it more a kind of monopoly, in fact, with over 65% market share controlled by one airline. and we've seen what happens when this airline decides to hold the country to ransom.
Well, obviously it is. You see, I think government needs to be stricter. We need stricter regulations. And what is also important is that we need more companies and more private investment in this sector. But for that, I would say what happens in this case is, you see, the system is built in such a way that unless and until you have a lot of financial muscle, you are bound to fail. But for that, so the government also needs to bring down prices of aviation fuel primarily. Unless and until you do that, and everything in terms of the regulatory, you want to become a first world economy by 2047, which is for developed world, but you are not going to provide the country and the people of that with first world services. And airline is something, I mean, all of us have got used to it, in the last, I would say, 10-15 years, or maybe almost 2 decades now. All of us have got used to it. And gradually, when we started flying, when the common people of India started flying, think of how many airlines were there. There was Kingfisher, there was Jet, then there was Go, SpiceJet, Indigo, Air India, then, so at least 5-6 airlines were there. But ultimately, eventually, everything became unviable. Of course, there was mismanagement on the part of the airlines management, but at the same time, as I said, if you make the conditions, if you are still going into a situation where you are operating like license permit Raj, it cannot work. You have to relax the rules when it comes to investment. You have to provide the conditions to the airline companies so that people, the companies, ordinary individuals will not be coming and investing in airlines. So you will have to ensure that people who are willing to do business here, they have that kind of freedom, and they have, particularly aviation fuel and all. I mean, why do we still have such high rates? All right. So until and unless you are providing the companies with the right kind of conditions, which I'm sorry to say, no government has been providing up to a point, then there is no point building airports and in huge numbers. And it is what happens is that if you are not looking into those things, not looking into those issues, this is what happens. The only company, one or two with actual financial muscle, they are the ones who can succeed. And then when they fail, this is what happens. You see, if you look at the US, for example, there are so many smaller companies over there which are running airline business over there. I mean, hardly anyone, from point to point, beyond a distance, hardly anyone takes a train or even drives for that matter. They are all into airlines. Why is it flourishing in such a big way? Now, so it is ultimately on the government.
Okay. I think Mukesh Tyagi is back with us. Mukesh, we lost you earlier. Please complete your point.
Yeah, it should not exceed under any circumstances 25%. And it's the government onerous responsibility to have a great planning. They should not allow duopoly or a monopoly of this kind. I think this is going to reform this sector in a very revolutionary fashion. I was listening to the minister. I think minister gave a very convincing response, and look at the preposterous response where the CEO has given. He has not highlighted the FDTL, the major crisis. He's talking about the software glitches. He's talking about the weather conditions. He's talking about the shrinkage in the airspace, but he's not squarely addressing. He's still giving a very roundabout reply, which is extremely embarrassing. We have really no idea what is going to be the real situation. Number two, Uday, I do not know whether insurance companies are endorsing this relaxation in FDTL policies for 2 months for these pilots, because ultimately, if any accident happens, it is a serious compromise on safety standards. Passengers will be scared traveling where the pilots are.
But how does that happen on ground? It's very well to say that we need more airlines, Captain Randhawa, but how do we get more airlines to take off in the Indian aviation market? Many players are spooked because of what has happened with Vijay Mallya of Kingfisher Airlines and Naresh Goyal of Jet Airways. How do you get, new individuals to come and invest in airlines and get them to take off?
What Joyita said, I concur with it. You see, there are a lot of things which the country would have to do. You have to ease the certification. You have to stop the license Raj, what she rightly said. I've been a part of DGCA. I know how long and how much time it takes to get the certification through if you start an airline. And thereafter, there are other norms which are very, very pertinent. That is, you have to reduce the taxation, you have to reduce the taxes on the fuel, you have to make it, the landing charges, the navigation charges, you have to waive off in small cities. So there is a lot of effort required on the behalf of the government. You just can't say, okay, today even a person like Ambani or Adani, they are scared to get into aviation. The reason is very clear that big players have come and they've gone. Like Jet Airways who survived for 26 years and so suddenly they went off. The problem is that you have to have a lower taxation, you have to give some kind of incentives to the airlines and promote them to come and join the fleet and make it more friendlier atmosphere. So until unless that is done by the government and there are steps taken, effective steps taken, no one is going to come. Can keep talking, keep asking people to come. No one is going to come. Secondly, we have asked the government that you are getting 1,700 more aircraft. Now for the 1,700 aircraft, where are the pilots going to come from? Where is the parking for these aircraft for next 5 years? So all these infrastructure, the manpower requirements, everything has to be sought. And you just cannot get an airline and start an airline without giving them the necessary support, which the government has to provide. In our country, I'm sorry to say that it will have to be done because the taxation on the fuel, even a liter of petrol, it actually costs 30 rupees, but actually it is costing 110 rupees, 105 rupees. So similarly is aviation fuel. That is a major cost to the airline after the leasing of the aircraft. So these all norms will have to be, and government will have to support. Only then you can have the airlines.
Yes. Well, the government has said, that they have, reduced leasing norms, leading to, of course, more aircraft, fleet acquisitions for airlines. That's what the Civil Aviation Minister had said in Parliament as well. But what more, Yogesh, needs to be done? What more policy measures need to be taken to ensure greater interest in this aviation market from new players and also scaling up of existing players in the market?
Definitely, they should make a very simpler rule for the new investors to start the airlines, as well as secondly, I would say that those guys who are doing the non-scheduled charter services, they should be offered, or they should be given an ample amount of the opportunity so that they come out with the more options as an airline standard. And apart from that, the maintenance definitely cost so much to the airline, where it affects the operations, as well as they should also implement the new long-haul operational activities. Only in India, I believe 2 or 3 centers are there. After a period of years of the service of the aircraft, they go for the long-haul services where they have to get it done from the overseas. Such kind of the facility should be implemented. As Captain Randhawa said, they should cut down with the fuel prices, as well as the navigation, the route charges, as well as they should come out with more connections with the tier 2 and tier 3, as well as the investors should be called and give them a very healthy environment with the DGCA side also.
Now the routes of Indigo have been reduced. That's one of the first measures that the government has already taken, Joyita. Is there a need for more such measures? Obviously, the government is seeking to penalize Indigo, reduce their monopoly as well. They've reduced their routes by a certain percentage to start with. Are more such measures needed to penalize the airline, to tell them that they cannot take things for granted?
No, but Uday, do you realize one thing? By trying to penalize the airline, you are actually penalizing the passengers. Because if you are cutting down a particular maybe by 10%, 20%, whatever, you're basically affecting hundreds and hundreds of flights. Now, what does that mean, and who is the ultimate? Who will be suffering because of that? It is the common man, and it's the common passenger. And even if you have seen, even if they cut their routes, maybe in the smaller towns and all, the kind of, I would say, crowd, the kind of the heavy traffic that exists, even in small town India nowadays, that itself shows that people are willing to spend in traveling. So until and unless you are providing them with some sort of an alternative arrangement, and trains are not good enough in terms of to carry that number, okay, fine. I mean, you need to introduce more trains then as well. So you see, it has to be a holistic approach. I mean, I personally don't see how cutting down Indigo's routes by 10% is going to help in this current scenario. It's a stopgap arrangement. Of course, the people who are in the aviation industry, they may be able to explain it better. But the fact of the matter is that from the traveler's point of view, it's a huge headache.
Okay, let me in fact also quickly bring back in Mukesh Tyagi. Also, the fact is that billionaire-driven industries, let's be honest, can manufacture crisis at any point. This crisis can be for the government. This crisis will also be for taxpayers and the customers. We've seen it happen this past week. Many believe that this could have been a man-made crisis, and it can happen again in the future too, Mukesh.
Absolutely. I think it's a manufactured crisis. They knew.
And this is for any industry or sector.
Absolutely. You are right. And I think this example might be causing gross inconvenience to passengers, but I think it will trigger many reviews. Like, for example, railway has not got into the private hands. Otherwise, you can see the passengers will be absolutely coming to grinding halt, where it's a government supporting it. And I think governments need to take a fairly substantive control in terms of operational autonomy. They have to create a structure. They'll have to revamp. DGCA has not been able to do the job.
All right, we've lost Mukesh Tyagi. Captain Randhawa, come in here on also whether we need SOPs, emergency measures for crises in the aviation sector. We have the ESMA, we have, of course, many sort of emergency measures for public transport, for fuel, for power, electricity, of course, but not for the aviation setup. Do we need emergency measures as well?
The emergency measures in case of an aviation, the only standby arrangement in our country in the network is the railways, and to some extent the road transportation, the buses which connect smaller towns and all. Otherwise, there is no alternative. Even if you see in our country, even the helicopter operations have not progressed as much as in the West. So if you see any advanced countries, you will find that the helicopter operations have taken a big role. Now, I would like to intervene. Joyita said something about 10% cut should not have been given to Indigo. By the way, let me correct her that in the winter schedule of Indigo, the DGCA had approved 5%, 6% extra flights in that's approximately 170 flights, 160, 170 flights a day, without checking into the account whether they have the sufficient number of crew, they got the aircraft, and a blanket clearance was given. And this has been our demand that, okay, you have given a blanket approval to the Indigo Airlines regarding non-compliance with the current CR. So how about first cancelling their extra approval which you gave? So I'm glad that they have curtailed 10% of the routes, because Indigo is harping upon that we have less pilots. Now, let me tell you about the pilots. The 65 captains and 70 first officers are short. That is all. That is in case we will take into account the full schedule which they're going to run without the 10% cut. But with the 10% cut, they have sufficient crew. By the way, for 135 pilots in a year, Indigo has managed to save 1,500 crores. They are not telling the public does not know, but I'm telling you, 1,500 crores they have saved by not recruiting 135 pilots. So this 10% cut which has been given for the routes, I think it's more appropriate that the other airlines who have the spare capacity, like Air India, would have spare capacity, and they have got 6,000 pilots.
Okay, 30 seconds, Yogesh, I'm out of time. 30 seconds, last word.
So what I'm saying
Yogesh Kumar, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Do we have him? Okay, I think we've lost him. Joyita Basu, why don't you take the last word? Joyita Basu.
Well, if that is the case, because obviously Captain Randhawa will know better. The thing is, you see, then obviously, Indigo had no business. If you do not have the pilots, you do not have any business of trying to fly. Grab more and more space. So the whole point is that, you see, but as I said earlier as well, it is ultimately the government that will have to loosen the regulations, because you see, India is not short of billionaires. India has a lot of money. Our industrialists, they are building Jaguar and all sorts of things. They control international companies. And you mean to say that they cannot fly airlines in India? All right, forget about of course, they are already, one of them is already flying that Air India business, but there is Ambani's and Adani's. There is so much money in this country. So the reason we have to find out is, why aren't they investing? So it is the government that will have to ease the process for
all right. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us. We've run totally out of time. Let's slip into a very short break on that note. Much more coming up.